Hey guys, Chris Americos here with another video for you, and today's video is about phrasal verbs. Now the term phrasal verbs might scare some of you who have studied this before. You know that there are a lot of phrasal verbs and it's really difficult to understand the meaning from context sometimes. Well, in this video we're going to talk about some basic uses of phrasal verbs. First of all, why are phrasal verbs so difficult? I think there are two main reasons. First of all, native speakers, people who speak English as a first language, use a lot of phrasal verbs in their speech. And when they speak to someone from another country and they try to speak simpler or easier so that the person understands them, they often use a lot of phrasal verbs because the words are very small. Any of you out there who are not native English speakers know that phrasal verbs are not easier to understand. In fact, longer words with Latin or Greek roots are usually easier to understand than phrasal verbs. But many English speakers think that phrasal verbs are easier because the words are smaller. Another difficult aspect of phrasal verbs is the fact that the majority of phrasal verbs have at least two meanings. And these two meanings are often unconnected. Meanings of phrasal verbs can also be broken down into two different categories. Phrasal verbs often have a directional meaning, and phrasal verbs have a metaphoric meaning. We'll talk more about that in another video. While understanding the meaning of all phrasal verbs would be a very difficult task, understanding the grammar of phrasal verbs is much simpler. So what are phrasal verbs? Phrasal verbs are verb plus particle. A particle sometimes is a preposition, sometimes is a different word. This special verb-particle combination, which is called a phrasal verb, has special meaning. When thinking of phrasal verbs grammatically, we should break phrasal verbs down into three categories. The first category includes phrasal verbs that do not have an object and the verb and particle cannot be moved or separated. A good example of this category is run away. It doesn't have an object. We don't say run away, you. And the words cannot be moved or separated. We cannot say run there, away. We must keep these words together. When they're together, they have a special meaning. The second grammatical category of phrasal verbs is phrasal verbs that have an object, but the verb and the particle cannot be separated. A good example of this is look for. You look for something. I looked for my keys. So it has an object. But we cannot move the two words. The verb and the particle cannot be separated. We don't say, look my keys for. That's wrong. And the third grammatical category of phrasal verbs includes phrasal verbs that have an object, the verb and the particle can be separated, and one last rule. If the object of this phrasal verb is a pronoun, yeah, I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they, pronouns, it must go between the verb and the particle. I know, that's a lot to remember. A good example of this category is turn off. We can say, turn off the lights, or we can say, turn the lights off. That's because with third category phrasal verbs, the verb and the particle can be moved or separated. And we can say, turn them off, but we cannot say, turn off them. Because with third category phrasal verbs, if the object is a pronoun, it must go between the verb and the particle. Now, how do we understand which category a phrasal verb is in? Well, we can check the dictionary and it will tell us if this verb is transitive or intransitive. If it's intransitive, it doesn't have an object. But it's much easier to understand a new phrasal verb and which category it goes into by just seeing how it works. Reading it in text, hearing it from other people, that's the best way to learn. If you have any other questions about the grammatical categories of phrasal verbs, make sure to leave a comment under this video and I'll answer you. Press like, press subscribe, and make sure to come back for the next phrasal verb video too. Till next time, it's Chris Americos.